内容はちょっと彼に話すので、これから彼にお話を。
Okay. So, I've seen most of you already, but I develop on Bitcoin. I'm a developer on Bitcoin. So Bitcoin Core not so much. Recently a little bit for pushing some features, but most on NBitcoin, which is a library in .NET for creating Bitcoin product, in fact. And now I'm working with for Metacode, and we use what we call the Coloredcoins on the Bitcoin blockchain to transmit fiat currencies and or commodities on the blockchain. So, what I want, so I followed the discussion of Homa as much as I could. I'm not yet fluent in Japanese, so it was a bit hard to follow, but sometimes I understood. And I have not prepared anything special. I was thinking about exposing you my point of view between the different solutions and how you can sort that a bit, and also my point of view as a developer, which is different from a banker, that is different from an investor, that's it. So you have multiple point of view. But first, I think I will start by asking you if you have any question about anything about Bitcoin, technical or not. I hear you.
何か質問がまずあれば。
あります。
お前何者だってやるの。
I have a question. I'm wondering, recently I'm studying about open asset protocol, and I found two famous wallets, which is CoinPrism and Cori. And CoinPrism's address sounds like Coloredcoin, but Cori's address is Bitcoin address. So I'm wondering why Cori and the CoinPrism
Have different address?
well, yes.
Okay.
So how is it different? Are you competing with Cori or are you collaborating with Cori?
No. Open asset protocol. So the term Coloredcoin is very specific. In fact, for example, counterparty, we should not call it Coloredcoin for a specific reason that I will tell you. First, in the transaction in Bitcoin, what you have two parts: what you spend and what you create. So when you for example, you will spend 1 BTC, and I don't know, you will create 0.4 to someone you want to send, for example, to Alice, and 0.6 to you for the change. You spend each man and bill, you get back the change, and you send the rest to the person you're paying. So those are called coins. We call that coins. And in our specific example here, it's called unspent coin, because I have one transaction and for now I didn't spend anything. Okay. So one first thing I want to talk about is that what we call Coloredcoin protocols are all the protocols that on top of this meaning had another meaning to each of those coins. For example, this one represents some fiat currency, for example, or some commodities, or a loyalty token, for example. So this is the definition of Coloredcoins. Then there is multiple protocol. Just the tree that passed me by the head is open assets, which we call OA most of the time. There is one another that I don't even know how to pronounce, but it's IPOBC. I think it's they have a wallet. I don't remember the name. I think it's Consport. But there is two protocols. There is OA, IPOBC, and Cori. One thing that you should know is that Cori is the owner of Coloredcoin Coloredcoin.org. If you go to this website, you will even see an interview of me. But right now, they are trying to make people believe that there is only one protocol that is this one. This is not the case. There is 3 protocols, at least 3, maybe there is more, I forget for now, but OpenAsset, IPOBC, and Colo. So now I will tell you why there is different address and why it's very important.
So is it intentionally misleading the audience? I mean, Coloredcoins.org.
Right. And the worst thing is that Coloredcoin.org, in the past, it was really a community website about Coloredcoins.
Yeah.
So before Colo existed, it was IPOBC and OpenAsset, and I think there was another one, I don't remember the name. So everybody was here, it was a community website. Then the owner created Colo and then just changed it to say there is only one protocol, it's Colo.
It sounds unfair.
It sounds unfair, and if you speak about that, so I know both, I know Flavien from OA, and also the creator of IPOBC, Alex Mizari. So I spoke with both of them, and they were both very pissed off by what Colo did. And yeah, well, it was not
very
very
important information.
Yes. So my point is that Colo, I've not looked into that technically speaking. Okay. There is one reason, is because the owner of Colo, I think, was a bit unfair and not very honest. But but it doesn't mean that the Colo protocol is not good. I cannot say because I've not studied it already. But I will explain you. So I will repeat the question of Omar, is that if you are in Coloredcoins, if you have, for example, a wallet on OpenAsset and a wallet that support Colo, then you will see something interesting, is that both of them, you will see that both of them have different address. So for example, if you have a wallet on OA, I don't know the address, you will say, for example, ABC, and for example, for Colo you will have, I don't know, EDO. 2 totally different addresses. So why is that? In Coloredcoin protocol, like I said, every coin has some kind of information that says which asset is it. The difference between all the protocols is where this information is stored. So in the case of OpenAsset, the information about the color of one coin, it's in fact inside another coin that is inside the transaction that has 0 value. So it's not a smiley, it's a 0. Okay. And so into that, you have some kind of information about what is stored, what is the color of this coin. And so the first question I will respond is why, for example, if you have an address with Bitcoin D, it's also different. For example, imagine that you have Bitcoin D. So Bitcoin D is the main wallet of the core pair. So imagine you will have, for example, DEC. So the same wallet, you can have different address. So why is that? It is. There was a question. No. So the difference is that imagine that someone sends a Coloredcoin to Alice on her Bitcoin D address. The problem is that the wallet, Bitcoin D, doesn't know anything about Coloredcoins. So for the Bitcoin D wallet, there is no color here. So the thing is that if Alice decide to spend her Coloredcoins, for example, no, if Alice want to send some Bitcoin to another person, for example, to Bob, the problem is that this, since it's only considered as a normal coin and not as assets, this asset will be destroyed. Because if Alice, for example, Alice make a new transaction with Bitcoin D, okay?
It's destroyed.
Yeah, it's destroyed. So what will happen is that she will spend the 0.4, and then I don't know, she will send, for example, 0.3 to Bob, and 0.1 to her. And so, if you are spending with Bitcoin D, this is what happens. The color of the coin that you spent disappeared. What it concretely means is that if this Coloredcoin means that it's, I don't know, for example, 1,000 euro, then this 1,000 euro just get burned, just like that. So actually right now, for example, if you use open asset wallets, they will ask you the address to the destination. And the thing is that if you, in their form, if you try to put an address that belongs to Bitcoin D, for example, it will say, no, you cannot do that. This wallet doesn't support open asset. Don't do that, you will destroy your assets.
Cool. In that case, open asset is more user-friendly than Collier. Because Collier, you may destroy Coloredcoin.
I was very surprised because I thought that Collier, I didn't study Collier technically, but I thought Collier was also their own address. So I was very surprised you said that to me.
So I was thinking that Collier is using Bitcoin address, but you are saying that Collier is using not Bitcoin address, not OA address, but different Coloredcoin address.
They should do that. I don't know if they do that because I don't know Collier technically, but they should do that because it's the same problem even for IPBC. So for IPBC, for example, the information about the color is not inside a fake coin here. The information is inside the sequence number that is another information inside the transaction output. It's a bit technical. But the result is the same. If you send to a wallet that doesn't support it, then it can destroy your assets. Okay? So it's more it's something for a user to prevent them to mess up.
So as far as I see, at least address-wise, open asset protocol is much better than Collier.
Yeah.
Because I can definitely see that it's not Bitcoin address, but open asset address.
Right. So yeah, I'm surprised if Collier didn't do that also, but maybe not. I don't know. There was another question. Is there another question, by the way, about that?
The concept of destroying the crowd coin is fine, but how to in real how do they handle that? I mean, how do they express, okay, this coin is destroyed?
So it's inside the in fact it's inside the protocol. It's inside the protocol. In fact, when you follow, for example, open assets, every time you want to transfer, and like I said, the core is attached to a coin, a particular coin, okay? And every time you want to transfer an asset, you always need to put, this open asset data, which are the core information of this coin. If you forget it, it's what destroys the coin, in fact. Because you cannot spend that anymore, because you already spent it on a normal Bitcoin transaction. So you cannot spend it twice. But at the same time, you forgot the information about what the core was, what Yeah, you forgot the information about what Coloredcoin you want to send to destination. So it's how you express, in fact, that you just destroy coins.
That means those, let's say, a transaction is recorded,
Yes.
but no actual transaction happened at all. That means
So this transaction, in this case, both transactions are recorded on the blockchain.
recorded.
Okay. They are both recorded. The only problem is that for miners and even for most Bitcoin wallets, a transaction, they doesn't know anything about colors. So this is a valid Bitcoin transaction,
Okay.
but this is not a valid Coloredcoin transaction.
Okay. It's recorded.
Yes, it's recorded. Yeah, right. So this one is recorded, but the Bitcoin transfer has been recorded, but not the Coloredcoin transfer. That's why it's destroyed.
So in that case, it's fine as a Bitcoin transaction, but as a Coloredcoin transaction, it's very confusing.
Mhm.
Sometimes Coloredcoin is destroyed because it's fine as a Bitcoin transaction, but not fine as a Coloredcoin transaction. So I'm wondering, this three protocol is actually competing.
Which one?
I mean, Coloredcoin concept is understood,
Mhm.
it's fine, but actually OA and AP, both OBDC and COLU are different protocol.
Right.
So actually it's confusing for consumer.
Right. And the most confusing aspect of it is that one, for example, there is a wallet that you didn't talk about that is called CoinSpark, I think. I heard about it. I don't know which protocol it uses, but you forgot it. CoinSpark.
CoinSpark.
It's another Coloredcoin wallet. And the thing that is very frustrating as a user is that when you go to the website of those wallets, they never say which protocol they are using.
Really?
Yes, for example, CoinSpark, I remember I've been on the website here, Cool Wallet, they speak about assets, but they doesn't say which protocol they use. So even CoinPrism, it's not really written open asset anywhere. So it's people, the creator of wallets try to hide the complexity to the user, but by doing that, for someone who knows, it's more confusing because you doesn't know which protocol you're dealing with. So yes, it's a bit confusing these days.
Is it happening because it's permissionless innovation?
Right, that's right. It's the best will win. Let's see what happens. So just a small comparison between those three, these two protocols at least, because the Colo I don't know really well. One of the limitations of open assets is that if you are an issuer of coin, you have no way to prove yet that you cannot issue anymore. For example, imagine that you want to create your own limited supply currency. You cannot prove it with open assets. You can say, I issued some coins, I destroyed the key, but nobody can verify if you really did it. And in IPOVC, you can do a limited supply currency, for example. Only 100 and will go, and that's all. So this is one small difference. And Colo, for the only thing I know, I think they support both Colo. I think they support both, but yeah, I'm not so sure.
So I'm seeing that Jerry is very fond of Colo, and he is you're saying that Colo is fantastic application or something. Do you know why he is that opinion?
So one thing that people should be very careful about is that, so open assets, the main advantage of open assets is that if you want to implement it yourself, it's 500 line of code. You can do it at launch, it's very simple protocol to implement. So there's very few ways to get it wrong. So the benefit from a simple protocol is that lots of people can implement their own implementation of it. And then you are sure it won't move because it's very simple. Whereas Colo, it's a more complicated protocol. I'm not even sure that the protocol is open. I I think it's proprietary. So it's one of the problems. And the way they try to market it is that if you want to use Cori transaction, you need to use our API. So in fact, there is their API here. You are here. If you want to do a transaction, you need to ask them. They create the transaction and then send it to the blockchain. Okay? The problem with that is if you need a middleman to build the right transaction, then the middleman is suddenly in control of you. Because maybe he can censor your transactions, or he can raise the fees. For example, if he want, he can raise the fee. He can say, okay, now you need to pay me 100 per month to use my API, and you cannot fight against it. So that's my main complaint. So right now, Jerry is very enthusiastic because he's using this API here. It's very easy to use, but since it's the only implementation, then if something happens at this here, it can have problems.
I see.
In the case of open assets, since it's very easy to implement, you don't have to have your middleman. You can do your own software. For example, with Betaco, we does not use CoinPrism. We have
In that case, it's like a competition between Linux and Microsoft Windows, and you should make an open asset community,
Right.
open source community, compare with proprietary code.
Well, yeah, I will see open asset a bit like TCP because it's a protocol that every router will end up implementing, I think, because of the simplicity of it. While in this case, you are obliged to buy the router of Cori, or for example, if I make the comparison with network device, in this case you are obliged to buy Cisco device, whereas in open assets you can buy any device that implements it. So that's my main thing that bothers me in Cori.
So it's a good community. At least I'm seeing the Ethereum community and the counterpart community, and I like to find a similar community for open asset protocol.
As far as I know, there is no really community behind it. Right?
But somebody should do it.
Yeah, right. But I think Flavien has a forum on CoinPrism, but even me, I've never been there, so I don't know how much active it is. And yeah, I know that, for example, Controversy have a nice community.
Yes.
So yeah, it's one of the points that need to be improved in the future.
Well, I'm going to ask about it to Fabio.
Yeah. Oh, definitely, yeah. So is there any question on the Coloredcoins? Yes.
Is it possible to describe make a license instead of transferring the ownership of the asset?
Yeah, one more time.
Is it possible to describe some licensing of the digital right?
You mean as Coloredcoins?
Yeah.
Yeah. So there is some people that contacted me and to ask me some kind of question about, because they had the idea to do that. So the principle, it is possible. So for example, you are an issuer of I don't know. You want, for example, you want to make your own ticket. For example, to go to a concert, you want to emit your ticket as Coloredcoins. You can do it. You can do it. The principle, in fact, in Coloredcoin, I took the example of fiat currencies or commodities, but it can be any token. The principle is that you have one issuer of something, and then he sends his coin, and people can exchange against one another. So it can be a license. It can also be a ticket for a concert. I don't know. We can really imagine that someone just buy his ticket on the internet, can send the ticket as Coloredcoin, and then when you go to enter in the room, you just send back the ticket to the company, and then can enter. Can you imagine that? Yes.
So in that case, the owner of that this right should issue a certain number of the ticket. Is
Yes.
this a limit to the license? Right.
So yes, for example, in the case of someone who sells.
For example, in that case, the 0.4 Bitcoin could be divided 4 tickets in each 0.1.
Yes, so when you emit an asset, you can decide about how many you want. But for example, if you have 100 seats at your concert, you can issue 100 coins, and then people can buy only them. But they cannot. You are the one who decides the divisibility also. So they can, for example, people cannot sell one half of a ticket. No. So it was what your question?
Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, you decide about the divisibility and the quantity.
Additionally, I imagine that it could be difficult to apply for the usage licensing. For example, to provide some permission to use that digital asset.
Why would it be complicated?
For example, the ticket-based solution is has a limitation of that usage number, right?
Yeah, but in the case of a ticket, for example, if you want your ticket to be able to be used, for example, if you are the issuer, you send your ticket to the person, but once they want to enter, they will send it back to you, so they cannot spend it twice. Okay, it's really like a physical party. They give you the ticket and then you give it when you go there. Except here it will be with a Bitcoin. Yeah. Yeah, if you are the buyer of a ticket, you only have one ticket. Or, for example, if you have 5 friends, you can buy 5 tickets, have it on your wallet, and then when you enter the concert, you just send those 5 tickets to the cashier, and the cashier say, okay, you can enter. So the principle is that the transfer of Coloredcoins, you have a transfer from the issuer to the holder, then the holder can send it back to the issuer or to the cashier or whatever. And we can even imagine that in this case, so one aspect that might be a problem for certain people is that since it's an asset, this ticket can be sold again to another one. So in some cases, it can be a problem for you. But it's really like a physical ticket, in fact.
Can I set the due date? The tickets available is until tomorrow, for example.
Yeah.
It's okay. Due.
To what? Sorry.
It is possible to set the
Make a date, right?
To due date. So this is a good question because I think that one of the BOSS protocol have inside the protocol a sort of due date where after due date the token is the color disappear. I think one of the two have. But in open assets, no, you cannot do that. But I mean, when you sell the tickets, the person that holds it, if he goes to the concert one day after it happens, then no matter what, he won't be able to use his ticket anymore. It's not. In some cases, it's not very useful that the blockchain enforce the due date. It can be done when the user wants to get back his service. We say the concert was yesterday, not today. But yeah, one of the two protocols have some.
Okay, contrary, we have to set the effective date. Well, can you set the effective date? Will start either
So the effective dates in open asset protocol, it cannot be enforced by the blockchain. But like I said, it can be enforced manually, because if you buy, like I said, if you buy a ticket and then go in the wrong concert in the concert one day after, you will try to enter with your ticket and they will tell you no, it's due. It's not the blockchain that will enforce that. It's really the issuer, the cashier, that will ensure that you go to at the right time. Okay.
Christians?
So your video is on coloredcoins.org.
Yes.
Is it before Corey dominates the
Yes.
site?
Yes, it was before.
It makes sense.
It was before. By the way, after a while, I posted a big summary on Reddit about what happened there. And yes, it was that one.
Very interesting.
Even the person that made the interview, so he was Swedish, he came in France, he made his interview, and even for him it was the Coloredcoin community, it was not Col, and now we left because of that change of policy. So it was very interesting. So it was a start of community, like you said, it was a good start of community, but they break it all to market coin.
So actually, Open Asset Protocol needs some support, some community, some site to brand some flagship of Coloredcoin
Right.
to compete with Coin.
Right. They won't need that. But right now, Flavian is too much busy coding.
I see. フラビアンっていう男がいるじゃないですか。すごいサイバリックで、2年の間にプレディクシャスを作った上にオープンアセットプロトコル作って、でさらにそのコインプリズムまで作って、でさらにオープンチェーンまで作って全部一人でやってるんですね。でその人が一人でやってるのがオープンアセットなんですけど、一方でそのカラードコイン .org っていうのがあって、それ昔この3つをやってたわけですよ。ところがコリってやつが乗っ取っちゃって、コリは完全にドミネートしちゃってるんですね。なので、その対策上、正直オープンアセットプロトコルにもその対抗した方がいいと私は思ってまして、そういう話をしてましたと。でもし、なんか例えばソニーさんが関心があれば、こっちのオープンアセットをこうサポートしてくださると、多少コリとコンピートできるって感じなんですけど、いかがでしょうか。
勉強会が機会ぜひ紹介してください。
I don't know if I have time, but I can also talk about the consensus aspect, because I know that before you were talking about Bitcoin XT, and I like to, if I have time, I don't know. I have still some time.
Yes.
Yes.
Not today.
Not today. We have how much time before?
We have still 20 minutes.
Yeah, 10 minutes or 20 minutes. Okay, it's okay.
It's okay. It's very simple, in fact. Because there was a question. So can you ask again your question about you asked me during the break?
That was another topic in our discussion during the Homo Science presentation. Some big company like finance institute questioned the reliability of the Bitcoin public network. So the point is the sustainability of the miners' incentive and the process of making consensus of the update the network.
So the stability, it's a big question about the stability of Bitcoin. Yeah. So I will respond to that because one thing that lots of financial institutions think is that by during their So, the problem with financial institutions, more likely with Bitcoin, is that they doesn't control it. So the problem is that when there is some change to make to the protocol, they cannot influence it. So the problem is that they fear that if they use Bitcoin, one decision they doesn't control can impact their bottom line. And so we can see, I can tell you one example where it happened, where a business was trying to build on Bitcoin. There was some kind of change of policy that happened, and it impacted this business. And this business was called Satoshi Dice. Maybe some of you already heard about it. So Satoshi Dice, I think even now, I think it's something like 10% of the Bitcoin transaction on the network, maybe more. In fact, it's a betting website. It's a website that's probably you bet with someone. It's a really dice. You don't bet on some event. It's really sort of dice game on the blockchain. And the problem was that every time there was a bet, there was a small transaction that was built. So, for example, there was 2 bettors. So what they did basically is that both of them spent some coins on the transaction, and then depending on who was the winner, then the coin go back to the winner, or something like that. And the problem with Satoshi Dice was that for some reason the output of the bet could be very minimal. For example, you could make a bet for 1 cent. And so you do a transaction, you put it on the blockchain, and for only 1 cent. And the problem is that if there is lots of very small transaction, then making a full node will become more and more harder. So it will hurt the peer-to-peer network because some nodes will disappear. Because if there is lots of small transaction, you need more disk space. So it was a problem. So the core developers say, okay, we will impose a new rule. It's not a consensus rule because there is 2 kinds of rule. There is the node rule and the consensus rule. The consensus rule needs the agreement of miners. The node rule doesn't need. Okay? And in this case, the developer made, even me, I was hurted by that not long time ago. I will explain why, for a similar reason. And so the developers say, okay, this Satoshi Dice is taking a lot of this space on the node. We will try to increase the minimum payout they might make to prevent them from spamming everyone. So they said that they invented the concept of dust. I think there was no dust before, and the developers invented the concept of dust, and they said that as a node rule, there should be minimum an output of 600 Satoshi in all transactions. Like I said, it's a node. We also say node polity. It's enforced on the node, not on the consensus. If a block have less than a dust, then the block is valid. Okay? It's only that if you send a transaction on the network with less than the dust, then the peer won't relay it. And most likely the miners won't mine it. So the developer did that, so they can do that by themselves without asking the permission to everyone, because it's a node rule, not a consensus rule. And the bottom line was that Satoshi Dice was impacted by it. But what they did, because Satoshi Dice always exists right now, so the only thing they did was that for the users, instead of saying you can bet for 10 cents, they say now you can bet from $1, for example. So now, for example, for Satoshi Dice, now they doesn't use a small output. Now they use I don't know, for example, more Satoshi for the bet. So it's a kind of example where a decision by a small group, the core developers, impacted in real way a business that was Satoshi Dice. But Satoshi Dice, when he saw that, could adapt himself. The world is not still, it's always moving. So when something happens, the business needs to respond. And so in this case, they responded by changing the rule of the game. So the user doesn't spam so much. So banks are very anxious about that because they say, what if it happens also to us? And in fact, it also happened to me because, so the dust was 600 Satoshi. Like I said, in Coloredcoins, you know, the coins that you are transferring are real Bitcoin. But since in Coloredcoin, we doesn't care about the value, the Bitcoin value of the coin, then we use a minimum. We use 600. And lastly, the developers again changed their policy. And so it means that they broke every Coloredcoin protocol because all Coloredcoin protocol was using the small value. So now we increase the value, but meanwhile they disrupt our business directly. So banks say we want to prevent that sort of things to happen, so we want our own blockchain, and I understand that. But what they need to understand is that in the case of private blockchain, the one who owns the private blockchain makes the rule. And if you are one bank, then okay, you make your own rule, you can ensure that it doesn't move. But imagine that you want several banks to collaborate on a private blockchain that span all of them. Instead of blockchain, I will say Visa, because it's what Visa does actually. But imagine that they all use the same blockchain to collaborate between them. Then the owner of the private blockchain on the middle is not. He may also need to make changes to the protocol that will impact the other bank. And more than that, some of this change might be some purely political change instead of. In this case, it was a purely technical choice for having the most peers on the network. So, if banks are moving away from Bitcoin to prevent against some sort of change of policy, I think it's not a good reason to adopt private blockchain because they will have the same problem. There is someone that controls the private chain, and then if they change things, then they will get impacted. But they doesn't say it yet because it didn't happen yet, but it will.
Are you saying that the bank and private chain will have the same problem with Dust?
It's an example. So the Dust is an example of where the core developer can make a policy that impact business directly without any consensus needed. Okay. So I took the example of the Dust, but it might be other example. I don't have any in mind, but this is a typical example that can happen.
So is the amount of Dust defined by Bitcoin D?
Yes, it's a node policy. So it's important. It's not a consensus policy. It's a node policy. So if every time you have a node policy, then the core dev can change whatever they like. For the consensus, it's more difficult. They need the miner approval. But
Actually, if miner does not approve the update,
yes, they can.
so miner can decide if which is good or which is
Right.
bad.
They can decide. For example, the miners can say, okay, I don't care about that. I don't want 600, I want 100. They can do that. It doesn't break anything. It will not impact their bottom line. They can do that. There's no
So
problem.
actually, Dust is changed from 600 to 7,000.
Yeah, I don't remember. No, I think it's 2,000 right now.
2,000.
Yes.
So when did it happen? So
1 month ago, I think. During the spam attack.
really,
Yes.
during
Yes.
spam attack, did miner choose new version?
Right. So the miners and as well the node policy, because what happened is that there was a spam attack on the Bitcoin network, and the way Bitcoin worked actually was that this spam attack was making the RAM of the computer bigger and bigger. So for example, normally when you have a Bitcoin node, you need something like 6 megabytes of RAM to run it. It's not so much right now. But during the spam attack, without the limit on the dust, then the memory can go to unlimited and crash the computer. So in urgency, the developers say, okay, we'll change the dust. Instead of 600, we'll put it at 2000. And by doing that, now the spamming transaction was no more accepted by nodes, so nodes stopped crashing. So they did that for security purpose, for technical reason they did that. And they did well, but unfortunately it impacts other people as well. So, but yeah, so after that you have to make your best. After that happened, for example, on the side of Metaco, we decided that instead of using hard-coded dust value, then we will provide them through a web service we control, for example. So company can adapt to be less hit by such change of policy. But yeah, at least the first time you have to get burned at it.
Have you ever experienced several attacks?
Yeah, so
Like that?
for the yes. So for example, for the spam attack, there was an attack I think in June that happened, and so the attack in June was very interesting. It was different. In fact, in June there was lots of transaction. It was not with the dust. It was well above the dust, so output, but the transaction was they were just sending coin to an address and back again. So they were doing basically nothing, but they were spamming the network like that. And so what happened was that the core dev said, okay, so all the industry, most of the industry hard-coded the fees of all transactions to, I think it was 10,000, 100,000 Satoshi. It was the fees and it was fixed in all programs like that before. And so this spam attack came, and the Bitcoin developers said, okay, so to protect against this attack, now we have to raise the fees from 100,000 to 1 million. I don't know, I don't really know the number, but they raised the minimal fee that they need. And the thing is that lots of different products broke because they were using the small fee of before. And so there was lots of debates. Lots of people say, oh, you see, we need bigger block so it doesn't happen again. There was lots of debates about this happening. But what happened in reality is that every service started to understand that you cannot hard code the fees. You need to have dynamic fees. So for example, if the network is very used, then the fees will go up. If it's not used, it will go down. So service adapted to it, and then the spam stopped. Service tried to adapt to it, and then the spam started again in September. But you have not heard about it, almost not at all. Why? Because all services, by seeing that they were impacted before, changed their policy, their fees policy. So when they tried to attack again the network with the same thing, it didn't work. And nobody heard about that. And so it's a kind of example where when an attack goes and it disrupts the Bitcoin network, everybody is freaking out. But at the same time, people just adapt to the situation. And if it happens again, then it won't work. And so it was this kind of attack right now cannot work anymore. So the spammer, if you want to spam, you need to give lots of money to the miners. So it's costly for him. And then another spammer tried to do this sort of attack with the small coin, with the small dust. But once again, it's exactly the same fix. People saw that there was a spam, they raised the dust, and now they are implementing dynamic dust. And if it happens again, it won't work. So people just adapt to the situation.
Is dust the minimum fee of transaction cost?
No, dust is the minimum output value.
Minimum output?
Dust is a minimum output value, and the and the other thing is min transaction fees.
So minimum transaction value is different from minimum transaction cost. Is it different?
So minimum transaction fees are different from minimum output value. So the dust is the minimum output value, 600 Satoshi. But the minimum fees is way higher. I think it's 0.000401 Bitcoin. So before everybody relied on this hard-coded value, but since the attack now nobody does. And if you look at transactions on the blockchain, now not one has the same fees because of the attack. Everybody attacked it.
It's very interesting.
It's why right now, for example, for Ethereum, I'm very interested into what they do, but I wait in mature because in the case of Bitcoin, it has been around for a long time. There was a lot of attack on Bitcoin, and people learn a lot about experience and try to fix stuff. And it happened organically. And whereas Ethereum, I think they want to be big very quick, and they didn't have so much attack right now. And so that's why I'm waiting for Ethereum to mature between 1 or 2 years before going into it, because it doesn't have this battlefield experience that Bitcoin had.
So how will you imagine Bitcoin and Ethereum will coexist or compete or collaborate or whatever? What future are you imagining after 1 or 2 years or 3 years?
Well, if Ethereum work, I think that it will be two competing one, because I don't think people will move all the product, all the ecosystem we have on Bitcoin. You cannot change it like that from one day. You can just switch to another currency, like just. But
For a while, Ethereum and Bitcoin will coexist, at least for a while.
I think they will have two different purposes. I think Bitcoin will stay only for settlements, and Ethereum maybe for smart contract. I think they will still coexist together. But really, I don't know. We'll see. It's my bet. But for now, I'd like to see Ethereum survive between 1 or 2 years, because I don't know what can happen. If Vitalik is out of fund, I don't know what will happen to Ethereum, for example. So.
Okay, we have 5 minutes left. 5 minutes
Okay.
left. So anyone who have the questions, one more question. 一つぐらい何かご質問あれば、あと5分なので、どうぞ日本語でも結構です。
I have a question.
Yes.
We are developer for making apps using blockchain or Ethereum. Ethereum.
Yeah.
Yes. So we wondered that how do the control the digital asset on the Ethereum? For example, we have one digital image with blockchain, but this digital image is to transfer binary data with the blockchain. Where is the storage of digital asset?
I'm not sure I understand. So you are doing a game app, and you are using Ethereum.
Yes.
And for what?
Okay. Then we have a big question. I understand the blockchain mechanism. A blockchain is a hash code, but I wonder how to connect it, digital asset and blockchain asset.
Yeah. How do we differentiate both?
Yes. If blockchain has a has record of all transactions,
Yes.
but we hope to input a digital image asset on the blockchain.
Your own assets.
Yes.
Yes,
Is it possible?
yes, right. It's what we call Coloredcoins.
I see.
So for Ethereum, it's different. I don't know about Ethereum. I've never coded into Ethereum. I don't know the protocol. But if you are using Bitcoin blockchain and you want to transfer other assets, it's called Coloredcoins.
Can I ask you? In that case, like for example, if I want to change something with like open asset to Bitcoin or open asset, like this asset to like Ethereum,
Yeah.
how do I exchange it? Like we have to
So-
have a kind of like transaction, like
So you can, for example, if you have a open assets, assets,
Yeah, it's only the one, right?
you can exchange with other open assets
Yeah.
or with Bitcoin, but you
Yeah.
cannot exchange with Ethereum. You cannot cross.
So it's like exchange yen to like Bitcoins. It's exactly the same mechanism.
Right. Right. If you have correct coins that represent yen, for
Yeah.
example, you can exchange on the blockchain yen against bitcoins. if
Yeah.
you want. Yes. It's what we are doing now.
Yeah.
But you cannot cross the blockchain. You cannot cross the chain. You cannot buy from open assets. You cannot buy some Ethereum, for example.
多分一回この場を終わらせて、その後またずっと話した方がいいかなと思いますので、他によろしいですか、皆様。それじゃあどうも、長いこと今日はお疲れ様でございました。これにて本日の終了させていただきたいと思います。なお本日のビデオのですねコンテンツの方はちょっと佐藤さんが今海外出張中なので少し遅れてアップされるということでございます。
全部アップされるんですか？
おそらく全部。
一部ですよ。
一部とか見ると5分ぐらいしかない。
最初の10分ぐらいしかいないんですけど、
一部かな。
その後ちょっと長く編集されてたので、
これちょっと時間はかかるんです。
編集に時間がかかる。はい。
生を上げるのかと思って
それでは一旦これで何が終了させていただきたいと思います。この部屋は9時までで閉鎖されるということなので、もしその後個別にお話しされるのであれば出ていただいて外でお願いします。